Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yes, my name is James from San Bernardino. We have a lot to kind of go through today. This is actually a pared down version of a presentation that we've done a few different times here. So I'm going to move quickly. There will be some time for questions at the end, so hopefully I don't move too quickly, but just jot down anything if I go too fast, and feel free to ask when we get to that point. So yes, this is California State University San Bernardino. Just a few background points about our program here to give you a little bit of context. CSUSB launched a supplemental instruction program in 2012, but it was a little bit different because of our structures here, and I think this is probably true for most of our campuses. Allocating resources, ITS, scheduling rooms, all of that is tied to the academic schedule. So when our program launched, it launched very much like anything else would in the academic schedule. So they were courses that were offered for 2 units of non-baccalaureate credit. They were taught by teaching associates, sometimes adjunct faculty that would come in from off campus. It really was not a peer-led model at all. And they launched with 4 courses back in 2012. And then that was pretty much the model. They used primarily just DFWI rates in order to create that sort of, oh, I think it's moving ahead here, that sort of modality so that they could identify really what would be the best alignment. So as we look here kind of down this list, we did transition to a research-based UMKC aligned SI model in 2015-16, which is when I came on here, and we looked at really what would be the benefit to students, what were the challenges that they were facing in the enrollment model, how might we reduce the barriers that they were having, the hoops they were having to jump through in order to access the program. As a result of that, it made a number of different it changed a lot about the way that we approached the program. And in the 2017-18 academic year, we jumped from supporting 4 courses to a total of 112 sessions, supporting around 57 courses. There's 130 total sections. We did that by working in collaboration with 14 different academic departments. Now we work with 16, 17 different academic departments on campus. And then in this last academic year so far, we are still in the quarter system. So we're about to start our spring quarter. We're still in our winter. But we're on track for about 150 SI sessions, supporting 7 to 10 new courses, just piloting this year alone. So let me talk to you a little bit about how we've done that. So in the past, when we've looked at data and the data that would come to us, it was very linear. So there may be a campus administrative mandate that would come to our institutional research team. These are the kinds of things that we would like to look at, specific to DFWI, maybe to graduation retention, then to our division, undergraduate studies, and then that would be passed on to supplemental instruction. Then we would take that to the colleges and departments, to faculty partners and liaisons, and then we would move on, and that would kind of trickle down to SI leaders and to students in terms of impact. So we didn't have a whole lot of say in terms of what was being assessed, how it was being assessed. So sometimes that information was very useful to us, and sometimes it really wasn't useful to us at all in terms of programming and impact and our ability to leverage that to expand the program and to provide broader support for students. So we took a slightly different approach over time. Now, there was a relationship that predated my time here that was started back in 2012 between our undergraduate studies assistant dean and the Office of Institutional Research, and they began working collaboratively, on a number of different initiatives, not specific to SI, but that relationship blossomed over time, and we kind of built an ongoing relationship that I came into based on student success and graduation initiatives, on Starbucks and a lot of sarcasm. And really, one of the things, my background is very broad educationally, but I do have an undergraduate in vocal performance, instrumental performance, and I remember one of my instructors at one point told me there were kind of invisible rules that were just outside of his window that he would point to. He would call them neon signs, and the first one was, take a pianist to lunch. And the notion was that those relationships, when you need to be able to call in somebody for a gig or to accompany, to have the relationship already established is always going to be a benefit. And so it's not so much just calling somebody up around your specific need, but developing those relationships and dreaming together and talking about really shared mandates and individual mandates, and how can we support one another. So there was kind of a convergence of willingness and also the scope of our institutional research office and the officers there as a result of that ongoing dialogue, which really helped. And I want to emphasize that because I know that every institutional research department across our system has somewhat different mandates and different structures. And so for us, that was unique, but it was built on relationships. So we began a different sort of approach. So building on that relationship between Office of Undergraduate Studies and our institutional research department, we started collaborating and talking really about our needs, their needs, and what data was already out there and what data we needed to collect and why, what questions were being asked. We added supplemental instruction into that dialogue, into that circle, and then over time we started to add in other voices and stakeholders within our supplemental instruction initiative, faculty, department leaderships, liaisons. Eventually we did bring in, and I'll show you how this works in just a little while, we did bring in senior leaders, SI leaders, and students into that dialogue, looking at their questions and their needs. We brought in our provost office, our colleges, our deans. What were the needs and the questions that they had that we could be answering with data that would impact programming and student support? And it's just continued to expand from there. So we started with common questions, and we looked at questions that we were being asked by administration, by academic departments. Some of those questions included, are DFWI rates for SI participants lower than non-SI students? And that one seems rather obvious. But one of the big criticisms we continued to get regularly was this: aren't the students who elect to participate in SI those who would receive an A or a B without the support? And we wanted to be able to look at that specifically, but we knew that there were some inherent challenges. So we'll talk about how we faced some of those down in just a few moments. But you can see some of the questions there. Is SI more effective for some courses than others? We began to amass these questions and look at, are we collecting the right raw data, and what are we doing in terms of how we drill down and we mine that data to answer some of these questions, to do that with qualification, with credibility. So the first thing, before I know we need to slide a graphic over here, we had some issues with that. But on that, it wasn't just the stakeholders on campus. We found that as we were asking these questions, I'm also a part of an initiative that is a collaborative effort across the UC, CSU, and CCC systems here in the Inland Empire. We call it the IESI Regional Group, and it's a group of coordinators, directors, and other stakeholders within SI on these various campuses across these systems that are facing many of these same challenges and having to answer many of these same questions in terms of their programming and how do we responsibly move forward and maximize support for students. So as a part of that collective, we meet monthly. We decided that one of the ways we needed to address this was by holding an Inland Empire regional conference for SI leaders, for team members, for faculty liaisons, and for administrators, so that we could talk about some of these questions and that we could do some professional development and address some of these things on the backside. So while what I'm presenting here today is CSUSB specific, please know that this is a larger systemic and then even cross-system initiative that we're looking at. How do we best answer these questions? What are the questions on the table, and how do we best approach those? So here at CSUSB, what we did is that we started looking at that question in particular. We started with, were SI participants better students? Were these students who were already going to advocate for their own success, spend time in office hours, go to tutoring, SI, because they were good students who had solid study skills and were already going to do well in the course regardless? So what we did is we started using match sample comparison data analysis, and we matched students on, you can see that listing there, course, gender, ethnicity, student level, Pell Grant status. You can see the list. And so we would match a student who participated in SI, who matched on all of those various criteria, with a student who didn't participate in SI, matched on the same criteria, and we were comparing apples to apples. So we were looking at students enrolled in the exact same course, matched on these various in these various areas, and we looked at their outcomes. And then our institutional research department monthly produces and distributes across campus a Did You Know infographic. And I know it's small there, but you can see an example of what that looked like. The Did You Know for that month was on SI, and we were able to publish out a number of those data points that really addressed that specific question. And we were able to open ourselves up for some investigation there where there was information that was being provided campus-wide. And we did. It did drive our conversations with faculty, with staff, with administration, and it generated a good deal of interest and excitement around some of those outcomes. There were a lot of positives that we were seeing there as a result of that. So that was how we began. That was our first initiative. And then as we moved forward, let me see if I can, there we go. As we moved forward, we moved into what's called a participatory action research model. Now, I know that we did a pre-reading on that we sent out so that you could have a little bit of background there. Participatory action research, just in brief, is when you're utilizing the voices or bringing in the voices of multiple stakeholders in that research process, which is very circular, and that's why the graphics at the beginning are so important here to the way that we like to approach our research and our response to research. So we discover together, we examine the available data, we measure that out, and we come up with a measurable action. We co-construct different initiatives. In this case, we co-constructed a data infographic that you'll see here in just a moment. And then on an ongoing basis, there's reflection, and I'll show you kind of how that works here in just a moment. But if we could bring in that infographic, it was supposed to be in this white space here, but it didn't quite work out. So you can see it there, and this is something that we designed and published as a result of that participatory action research that involved a representative administrator, myself. We had a senior leader from our staff here, so we brought in a student and representatives from institutional research and effectiveness. And we sat around a table multiple times, actually, and we just looked at the data that had come in, interpreted that data, measured that out, and discussed how do we best communicate this to students, to faculty, to staff. And what we came up with was an infographic that just very clearly broke down the differences between the average non-SI participant for courses that are supported. So these are high fail rate courses. The average SI participant, and that includes students who came to an SI session even once. So 1 to, in our case, 20 different times. And then the SI participants who attended sessions throughout the entire term, we defined that carefully using the data set, finding that there was a bit of a jump for students who attended 4 times in the first half and 4 times in the second half of the quarter. Because we're a quarter system, they only have 10 weeks of SI sessions. So if they attended 8 sessions spread out, 4 in the first half, 4 in the second half, we saw an exponential jump, even using the matched sample data analysis, the comparisons there, in the number of passing students versus the number of those students who still would fail that course. And then we also saw an increase in the A and B range as well. And so we wanted to publish that out. And we were able to make that available to campus in multiple forms. It's available on our website. But that was our initiative at that point. And right now we're still in a participatory action modality. So we're meeting regularly with these entities to look at what are our next steps as we work through the promotion task and desire to connect even more students. Right now, we've expanded our program in terms of the number of courses that we support, but our next initiative is student access to those programs. So how many students are accessing those programs? Do students know about the programs? Because this is still relatively new on our campus. So how do we create a culture of SI here at CSUSB? So that's our current initiative as we look at our data and we look at who's accessing the program. Okay, so we can move on here quickly. The other way that we make that data available and that we have designed as a result of that action research is how do we want administrators, how do we want faculty and staff to be able to break down and drill down into that data in ways that are more relevant to them. So this isn't public facing. This is a dashboard that is not the CSU-wide dashboard, but a CSUSB specific dashboard where we publish that data and make it available. So you can see at the top, maybe it's small, but it says term. There's a drop down there, so you can look by academic year or by specific term. There's also a drop down that will show you all of the different courses that we support, so you can check those off and see all of this information will regenerate just specific to those courses as you navigate the dashboard. But here you can see that we're able to compare A's, B's, C's, other paths, DFWI, and course GPA for SI participants and non-participants. We also look at underrepresented minority status and how we're serving. We want to be serving equitably, of course. You can also see that there is a, I believe, back over here, we can break that down and look at the number of visits. So how many times do students come and what is the result in terms of the reduction in the DFWI rate. We also look here, let me see if I can jump back. We look at GPA SI participants. You can also see the start and end GPA. So this is another way that we look in terms of matching. We want to see that that is somewhat parallel so that we are serving students equitably, not just serving students who would already be doing well in the course. And then you can also see that we're seeking to close that underrepresented minority gap in terms of student access to the program. We're also starting to do some qualitative assessment or quantitative assessment around graduation and retention, and we have some exciting results there. So we're using that the questions those stakeholders have from all levels to figure out what it is that we need to address with our data, what kinds of data do we need to collect. We also do have some qualitative assessment. We don't have time to go into all of that today, but we have an orientation feedback for all of our professional development, including our orientation and training. We have ongoing professional development for SI leaders throughout the term, 9 different opportunities there. We have a beginning of quarter student inventory that helps our SI leaders with a snapshot, a demographic snapshot of who is in their session. Learning communities would be our professional development, and then also SI participation feedback surveys. So we take a look at that qualitative data as well, and that helps inform the questions that we need to be asking and what data we want to collect. So you can see here as we close, this is a sample of our collaboration on an ongoing basis in terms of how we use data to drive our program, to inform the decisions that we will make and how we've been able to expand. A lot of this data has helped us, we've been able to really take it to the bank. And what I mean by that is when we can show the impact of SI very specifically in very specific courses or maybe disciplines or with student groups, we can leverage that to be able to acquisition resources. So we may start with questions or with raw data, move around to initial findings, which raise more questions, refine that data, move into our participatory action research modality, and then come up with program responses, and then go back and collect data to see, have these responses been sufficient? Have we been moving that needle? Are we able to accomplish with the response that we have employed the things that we need to address in meaningful ways? And so for us, that's really what our model looks like here at CSUSB. Now, I know I threw a lot of information out at you very, very quickly, so we want to open that up for questions, any questions that you have along the way. I would also like, and I'll type it here in the chat, to make available to you if you're interested in knowing more about the IESI regional conference. Let me type in here. This is the website for that organization, and you can go and see what some of that cross-system collaboration looks like as well.
All right. Thank you so much, James, for this presentation. You gave us a lot of food for thought.